But are you satisfied that they
over the state?
You know, if you drive and it's the same thing, the same principle applies.
And at least as far as I know, and maybe I'm wrong, but has never been able to point to anyone who was compromised or killed or.
People were shouting the neighboring buildings from the residential complex. People ran with everything they could to put out the flames.
예상이네요.
Yes, I can. How are you? There you go. Well, I'm listening to you. I'm learning from you. How's my audio? Great, good, great. Thank you. Hey, Jose at the studio. I'm doing great. How are you? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Thank you.
I'm just wonderful. And yourself? Yes. How's that? Okay. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ten, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Thank you. Okay, great.
So, can the guests hear me? But can they hear me? Can they hear me? Not yet. Probably can. Hey guys, how are you?
Wonderful, wonderful.
great.
And
How are you?
yourself?
Good. We got Wilmer. You can hear me, right?
Yes, I can.
All right, and Garland, you can hear me.
Yes.
Good, good. Hey Garland, have you been watching that Ukraine series, Zelensky series?
No, I haven't.
Why not, man? You're all over it.
Really?
You're in
Oh, I
every
gotta
episode.
check it out.
You're in every
Oh,
episode.
wow.
We're now 7 episodes in, and you haven't seen it yet. That is
No.
not good marketing, my friend. You
Oh
gotta get
my
on
gosh,
that.
yes. I gotta get on that and share it.
I'm serious. I think of all the people that we interviewed, I think I see you in more episodes than anybody.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. And is it on Rumble?
No, that's probably why you don't see it. It's on X, and it's on Truth and
Oh,
Media.
and-
If you go to truthandmedia.com, it's all over there.
Yeah, and I'm not thrown off of X.
Oh, are you? You're not on X?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
well, no wonder you don't see it.
I'm ostracized from X. That's only for people who are decent human beings, apparently.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'll make sure that I don't even know how you
Yeah.
can see it. Go to truthandmedia.com.
Yes, have
and
them
you can
send
see
me a
it.
link.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah.
But
that's what
I'll
do.
have Joe send you links to it. He can send you
Yes,
some links.
yeah. Great. Excellent.
Ready to go? Let's do it.
What are we talking about?
You're about to find out. Give me a second.
Yeah.
Okay.
Here we go.
All stuff we've been covering all week, but add the Bolivia overthrow.
Right.
Attempt, the coup, as it were.
Are you learning Spanish yet? Trying to? Poquito? That's the most important word when you start, right? Set expectations for what I'm about to say. Yes. Hey everybody, I'm Ben Swan in for Rick Sanchez. Here are some of the stories we're covering today. WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange walks free after 12 years in exile, 5 years in solitary confinement. American missiles implicated in the deaths of innocent lives in Russia, and armed men attempt to overthrow the government in Bolivia. It's been a wild week of gripping stories, and we're recapping it all right here. Yeah. But they're all together? Okay, so did I jump it? All right. Let's do it again. All right. Hey everybody, I'm Ben Swan in for Rick Sanchez, and here are the stories we're covering today. WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange walks free after 12 years in exile, 5 years in solitary confinement. American missiles are implicated in the deaths of innocent lives in Russia, and armed men attempt to overthrow the government in Bolivia. It's been a wild week of gripping stories, and we're recapping it all right here. This is Direct Impact. Okay, there is a lot to talk about today, and we have the perfect panel to do it with. Joining me now to drill down on this week's big stories that are ignored, underreported, and misreported, let's face it, by corporate media, Garland Nixon and Dr. Wilmer Leon. Guys, thanks so much. By the way, they have their own Sputnik radio show called The Critical Hour. And this is certainly a critical hour, guys. Thanks for being here. Let's talk about, first of all, Julian Assange is free. The founder of WikiLeaks is now back home in his home country of Australia. A deal with the U.S. here and the Justice Department here requires that he pleads guilty to a single charge of conspiracy. And in return, he'll receive credit for time served, avoiding any further jail time. I'm going to ask you guys the obvious question. Did you think you'd see the day that Julian Assange walks free? But before I ask you that question, to me, it seems ridiculous that in order for Julian Assange to walk free, he has to admit to a crime he didn't actually commit, and he claims he did not commit, but this is the way the justice system in the United States works, right? In order for us to finally stop persecuting you, you have to admit you did something wrong.
This wasn't the justice system. This was the political system. And the justice system was used for political ends. It's not only that he did not commit the crime, the evidence showed that he did not commit the crime of conspiracy. He did not conspire with anybody to take anything. He did what media outlets do. He published the information that he was provided. But in order for the Biden administration to save face in this mess that they exacerbated following on the heels of Trump, then this is the abuse of the system that they had to use in order to walk away what they now can consider and spin to be a win.
Yeah, well, and Garland, it was always a stretch, right, as when we're saying, it was always a stretch to say, well, he didn't actually hack any materials, he didn't actually take the materials, but Chelsea Manning at the time, Bradley Manning, would never have been able to figure out how to download this stuff had Julian Assange personally not walked him through it at the time. But they had no evidence of this whatsoever. And this has been part of the problem in this case against Assange, is that not that he actually hacked classified materials, stole classified materials, but that he knew how to do it somehow and remotely talked Bradley Manning through this process?
It was absolutely, and not only did they not have evidence that he did that, the witnesses that they used, kind of the main witness, a guy named Sergey or something, whatever he was, the guy was, a pathetic witness. He admitted that he lied. He was a convicted pedophile. I mean, it was an absolute disaster. But I think a big part of it was they didn't want him to come to court because they spied on the defense team, which means, I mean, it would be difficult to get that past the Supreme Court. You could not make an argument that he got a fair trial. I don't think they wanted to get him there because they didn't want to get in front of the Supreme Court and lose, number one, and number two, clearly because of the election. So they got a conviction of some type, and they moved on because I think they knew they have enough trouble right now politically, and Joe Biden was looking for. This was about the election, in my opinion. about the 2024 election,
Yeah,
trying to get the left flank, such as it is, of the Democratic Party to kind of get off of his back a little bit.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it's very politically motivated. But look, again, this is what's happened with Assange, what's happened with Trump and a lot of his trials, what happens with most whistleblowers in their trials, right, is that you get these crimes that are process crimes, right? So they never found him guilty or even got him to plead guilty to committing a crime. It's a conspiracy charge, which means it's a thought crime. But let me say this. A court had ruled that his actions had not endangered anyone, right? And so, again, it's a thought crime. No one was in danger because of this. However, the State Department spokesperson, Matthew Miller, he seemed to miss that memo. He insisted to reporters this week that Assange did do wrong without really explaining what the wrong was. Listen to this.
But are you satisfied that the case is over?
So look, the Justice Department has spoken to that, and I don't have anything to add. Obviously, the ambassador put out a statement that said we were happy to work with our Australian colleagues on it, and that remains the case. I do think it is important when we talk about Julian Assange to remind the world that the actions for which he was indicted and for which he has now pled guilty are actions that put the lives of our partners, our allies, and our diplomats at risk, especially those who work in dangerous places like Afghanistan and Iraq.
Sorry, so I actually did cover the State Department back then, and I don't remember there being any public, there was a public concern that was raised about the potential security risk posed to sources who might have been quoted. Was there actually any, did you ever discover anyone who was injured, killed, had to go into hiding because of them?
So a few things about that. One, I can't give you a definitive answer only because I wasn't here at the time. You know, if you drive drunk down the street and get pulled over for drunk driving, the fact that you didn't crash into another car and kill someone doesn't get you out of the reckless actions and the endangerment that you put your fellow citizens in. And it's the same thing, the same principle applies here.
Right. Well, I don't think that it does. But the fact of the matter is that the State Department has been, at least as far as I know, and maybe I'm wrong, but has never been able to point to anyone who was compromised or killed or.
I mean, guys, there's so much wrong with everything that was just said there in that news conference. Let's start with the fact that, first of all, what kind of analogy is if you're driving down the street drunk and you don't crash into anyone? And that has nothing to do with what we're talking about. Secondly, the fact that you make a very definitive statement as the State Department spokesman saying there were lives at risk, there were partners and people whose lives were endangered, and then you say, give me an example. And he says, oh, I can't give you an example because I wasn't here. So then what are you even talking about? Please react. Go ahead.
He doesn't know what he's talking about.
Yeah.
And what this really demonstrates is the power and how far they will go to control the narrative. This is about the story. This is about the narrative. This is not about reality. And this is the same story that's being told by the New York Times. It's the same story that's being told by the Washington Post. Julian Assange is free, and Julian Assange pled guilty, and Julian Assange put the lives of people at risk. He didn't put lives at risk. What he did was embarrass American diplomats. He tarnished the images of Hillary Clinton and her ilk and their sensibilities. This has nothing to do with putting anybody in danger or in peril. That did not happen.
Well, and Garland, he embarrassed the Bush administration. He embarrassed permanent Washington. He embarrassed the Obama administration. As Wilmer rightly says, he embarrassed the Clintons. The truth is, though, is that I think you make the argument Julian Assange didn't endanger people's lives. He saved people's lives by exposing a war in Iraq and Afghanistan where civilians were dying at an incredibly high rate. It wasn't until Assange and WikiLeaks were brave enough to reveal this information that the public said, wait a minute, all these people who are being killed over there aren't enemy combatants. They aren't so-called insurgents, whatever that means. And they started to realize there are civilians in massive numbers who are being killed in these wars. I would argue that Assange saved people's lives by revealing this stuff, not putting people in danger. What say you?
Well, and what we saw with the State Department spokesman was the groupthink of the narrative. They all get together and they say certain things. And no, see, he was caught flat-footed when he made this statement that he put people's lives at risk within his group. no one would say, well, give me an example. There is no epistemological context within that group. It's simply, let's make a statement. He put people's lives at risk. Obviously, he was not accustomed to someone saying, give me an example of that. It was just that, well, within our group, this is what we all say. This is the story. And no one's going to challenge that story or poke at that story in his group. And you see the State Department spokesman get caught every single time someone is given the opportunity to ask a question that digs below a superficial narrative that they have. They always get caught flat-footed.
Well, that's so well said, because, and you're absolutely right, because the reality is he's not used to anyone saying, who, when, what are you talking about? And so instead he says, well, I don't know, I wasn't here. Well, then why are you even talking? Why are you up on this, behind this podium right now, talking as if you have some kind of knowledge or expertise in this area? And I think this is, again, this is the problem in permanent Washington, is that there is this prevailing narrative that surrounds everything, and it's in this ridiculous kind of group speak in which they do say things like, well, WikiLeaks endangered the lives of our partners. WikiLeaks didn't endanger anyone's lives. How about the military pilots who are shooting journalists and in Iraq and killing Reuters journalists, and that's revealed by WikiLeaks? Where's the condemnation of that and the lives of journalists that was put on the line?
The danger comes to the First Amendment in terms of the attack on the freedom of speech. The danger comes as Americans are not being told the truth by their government about how their tax dollars are being spent, how atrocities are being committed in the names of American people. And unfortunately, there are too many people in that press corps that are so desperate for access that they won't do what that State Department reporter did. They won't question the narrative. They will not put those individuals standing at the podium or at the dais on point and ask them, you've just said something, now can you provide data to support it? They won't do that because they want to be sure that they get to ask questions. They don't want to get the reputation of going against the grain and not following the narrative.
Well, and you guys are both right about that. You're both very brave journalists in your own right. But the reality is that when you have this merging of, you know, permanent Washington, the bureaucratic state, deep state, and these agencies that run everything with the media, which we've seen now for at least 20 years, where no one questions anything anymore, that's precisely the problem. But guys, let me hold you over, because don't go anywhere. When we come back, we're going to delve into the controversy surrounding U.S. missiles allegedly used to kill civilians in Ukraine. Plus, we're going to unpack the dramatic failed coup attempt that rocked South America this week. Our panel returns after the break to discuss these pivotal events. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Direct Impact. I'm Ben Swan, in for Rick Sanchez, and this is the Weekend Review. Switching gears now to southern Russia, where Ukraine launched strikes on Sunday, targeting the city of Sevastopol. At least 4 people were killed, including 2 children. Over 150 people were left injured, and many of them, as you'll see in this video, were simply enjoying the end of their weekend.
Отдыхаю в санатории.
I was relaxing at a resort when I heard an explosion, then a second explosion, and a third. Something flew into the building from the sky. I went out onto the balcony to see what was going on. Everything was covered in smoke. People were screaming. I saw something fall into the building. It was about the size of a bird. People were shouting, "You're on fire, you're on fire," from all the neighboring buildings, from the residential complex. People ran with everything they could to put out the flames.
It is an incredible story, but maybe the most interesting part of the story, though, is that Russian defense officials say the strikes were carried out using American Attack-MS missiles, which can only be operated, we're told, by U.S. experts. Reportedly, all flight coordinates need to be input by American specialists using American intelligence. So let's bring back my crew of guests now, Dr. Wilmer Leon and Garland Nixon, hosts of the Critical Hour on Radio Sputnik. All right, let's start with you, Garland, here. I mean, obviously, this is a major story. If what is being reported is true, that these were American missiles fired by Americans, that's already a big part of the story. But maybe even bigger is, remember, this strike took place in Crimea. We've been told for years now that Crimea was illegally annexed and it actually belongs to Ukraine and it's full of Ukrainians. And yet these missiles were fired undoubtedly by Ukraine, which means that Ukraine was firing on their own people.
Well, no, a couple of things here. Number one, and that is that we all know that these were Americans. That technically, as RFK Jr. stated recently, that's an act of war to fire for the U.S. This was not Ukraine. Ukraine does not have the technical capability to fire these missiles. This was the United States government firing weapons at civilians in Russia. It's an act of war, which is in fact a constitutional violation because the president of the United States does not have the authority to commit an act of war without running it through Congress, number one. Number two, I'll say this. The idea that Ukraine wants to re-annex millions of Crimeans and millions of people in Donbass who speak Russian, and their language is outlawed. Their religion is outlawed, number one. And number two, if they came back in a so-called democracy, they'd be allowed to vote, which means that they'd vote as a bloc and put in a pro-Russian government in Ukraine. So even the idea that they want to re-access, that they want to bring these people back into the Ukrainian nation is in and of itself preposterous.
It absolutely is. And Wilmer, I think to Garland's point about this being an act of war, the reality is it's not just unconstitutional for any U.S. president to engage in war without a declaration of war from Congress. But that hasn't happened since World War II, so that's not going to happen. What I think is even more striking here, though, is that they're not even admitting that they're doing it. So it's not just that it's illegal, it's that it's illegal and it's being done in secrecy.
Well, this goes back to the point that I made in the previous segment, and that is the United States, citizens of the United States not being told the truth about the actions that are being taken by the American government with American taxpayer dollars, and they aren't being told what is being done in their names. As to the issue of Ukrainians firing on Ukrainians, to the earlier point that Garland made, these are considered to be ethnic Russians. They speak Russian. They follow the Russian Orthodox Church. In fact, this was done on a Sunday on a holiday when the beach was crowded, full of Crimean/ethnic Russian individuals. And this was not some benign event by the United States. To your point, ATACMS are only used by American soldiers. This was, as Robert F. Kennedy Jr. so aptly said, this is in fact a war crime.
Absolutely. All right, let's move on here because we got a lot to cover. I want to show you guys video that we've collected here. Armed men raid Bolivian government palaces in an attempt at seizing power, and it fails. Check this out. All right, so this is where things get interesting. Juan Jose Zuniga, the alleged leader of this coup, is now under arrest and claiming this was all a plot to boost the popularity of the president, Luis Arce. Now, do you guys believe that, or could there be other reasons behind all of this? Garland, go first.
Well, as soon as I found out that the Bolivian government had signed a deal with Russia to mine lithium, I knew it's just a matter of time before the regime change crazies over at Foggy Bottom made their move. But this just to me shows that, let's just say, they've lost their fastball. If you look at the infamous debacle called the Bay of Piglets, where they sent a bunch of guys in wandering through the jungles who literally lost a gunfight to fishermen, right? And you realize they just don't have it anymore. And now what do? If you look into this, they like occupied the square in front of the presidential palace. That's how far they got. So, I mean, in theory, was this a regime, a change attempt? Yes. In practical application, if this is the best they got, I don't think they could overthrow, a fast food restaurant at this point. And I'm glad of that.
Well, it seems like that is the problem. It does seem to be getting worse. I would say if you track, especially in Latin and South America, the competency of coups going to Venezuela and this whole thing that was tried with Juan Guaido, none of it makes any sense, Wilmer.
No, it doesn't. And coups, I think, have been going on in Bolivia for 1946, 1945, something along those lines. We know that Evo Morales is waiting in the wings, waiting to run for re-election. And if this was a coup attempt, please no one try to present a coup on my behalf. Yeah. Because with coup plotters like this, who needs enemies?
Absolutely. All right, speaking of coup plotters, let's finish up here with the U.S. Secretary of State, Anthony Blinken, announcing a new State Department partnership, you can't make this stuff up, with YouTube Music. According to a press release, it is all part of an effort to further the United States' elevated commitment to use music to promote peace and democracy. Promoting peace and democracy through music. Anthony Blinken. I mean, this is, again, it's comical to see this stuff. Wilmer, come on. Anthony Blinken, we know that he's like an amateur guitarist, has some like awful rock band from the 60s. But this guy, working with YouTube, I guess the thing that makes it not funny to me is the fact that YouTube is such a censor around the world in terms of what they're able to do. Whenever you see partnerships with the State Department, it's not a good thing.
No, it's not. And Ben, I don't know why you're trying to insult amateur guitarists by calling him Blinken an amateur guitarist. He's an amateur. There's no question. But amateur guitar. But the irony here is that the Biden administration is on the march against social media. If they really wanted to promote peace, they would allow a freer dissemination of information within the sphere of social media platforms. But no, that's not what they want to do. They want to clamp down on media platforms. So it is very ironic that they're turning to YouTube Music to promote peace. And I wonder what artists they're going to use to do so. Well,
not only what artists they use, but all the money, taxpayer dollars that are going to get pumped into YouTube Music now in order to help, again, push it up. But, we do something for you, you got to do something for us. So I don't think since the 1960s and 70s have we actually had music that was part of a resistance to anything that government has done. That's been pretty much wiped out. But this almost guarantees that doesn't come back, does it not, Garland?
Yeah, and this is hilarious because, as a person who does a YouTube show, I can tell you the one thing that you're going to get censored for on YouTube is trying to promote peace and democracy. So the idea that they've somehow done a 180, or as Annalena Baerbock would say, a 360, is kind of hard to believe. But the other thing about it is this. So now Tony Blinken wants us to believe that he's trying to promote peace and democracy. How's that going, Tony Blinken? I mean, let's look at his record. How is Tony Blinken's efforts to promote peace and democracy in the world since he's come to office working? I have a funny feeling that if you evaluate the results of his work, you'll come to a conclusion that either he's not good at it or he's lying.
Well, or Garland, there will eventually be peace in Ukraine, won't there? There will eventually be peace in Gaza, won't there?
But when you get to redefine the words peace and democracy, when you create your own meaning for those words, and I suppose it can be. Listen, we're living in a time where up is down and down is up, freedom is slavery and slavery is freedom. Democracy and peace are actually tyrannical regimes like what Zelensky's running in Ukraine right now. But Blinken's all about that stuff. Guys, great having you on with us today. Thanks so much for your insight. See you back here next week. And that is our show for you. I'm Ben Swan. We'll see you next time with more stories that make a direct impact.
We are a fighting people, and we will not allow any coup, especially against the constitutionally elected president.
He plans to taste real food, and he plans to enjoy his freedom.
We are a fighting people, and we will not allow any coup, especially against the constitutionally elected president.
But are you satisfied that the case is over?
So look, the Justice Department,
who was compromised or killed or
Hi, Andre. I got you. Ooh, my hair. Hi, Jose. Okay, sound good? All right, thank you. Thank you.
Okay. There you go, Manila. Hey, can you hear me? Hello, hello. Manila.
Hmm?
Can you hear me now?
I don't hear Ben.
Oh.
I could see him.
I'm talking to you. Talking to you about Bolivia.
There you are. Bolivia.
There you go. Can you hear me now? I assume so since you are responding with the same weird way I said Bolivia. Luis Arce.
Arce.
Oh, to be the president of Bolivia and have access to all that lithium.
Yes. Yes, like this.
Exactly.
Lithium.
Whoa. Like Dr. Evil. 1 billion.
Lithiums. I think I made a bad shirt choice.
Why? Because you're blending in, you're just like a floating head?
No, at least on my end, I feel like I look like I'm wearing like a Pakistani man's like long blouse that they wear. But it's like a nice silk blouse.
I'll let you go with
but
that.
Like
I won't comment.
I can't make it not look like an Afghan peasant shirt or something.
Sounds good. Sounds like a plan, man. I do, loud and clear.
Maybe try to pull it apart. Maybe. No, it won't stay.
Is it Camila Cabello? Is that who we got?
Esteban. No.
Camila Escalante.
Camila Escalante. That's it. No, I can't do that.
Next best thing. Almost the same thing. Okay. I heard you, Louis. Yes. I look tiny in my box. I look like I'm barely fitting in it. I said, I look tiny in my box. I look like I'm barely fitting in it. Hi.
Hi, I'm Ben Swan.
Well, I think they're adjusting it in there. Yeah. There it goes. So, Louis, this show is airing today?
No, Friday.
On Monday. Got it. And the one that we did last Monday that never aired, that's the one we're holding?
No, it already aired today.
Oh, the immigration one. That's right. That's right. Yeah. That's right. Because I was like, that was going to seem super dated. Okay. Got it. Totally. Makes sense. I forgot what we did yesterday. I didn't remember what the show was. We did an immigration show? Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Sit up.
Hey, everybody. I'm Ben Swan in for Rick Sanchez, and this is what we're talking about today.
We are a fighting people, and we will not allow any coup, especially against the constitutionally elected president.
Chaos erupts in Bolivia as an attempted takeover spirals out of control. Armed men storm the grounds of the government palace in a bold move to seize power from President Luis Arce. We've got the wild images, and we'll dig into what this could mean for the future of that South American country. This is Direct Impact. So let's get right to what's happening in Bolivia and the apparent failed coup attempt. On Wednesday morning, armored vehicles rammed into the doors of the government palace, leading to a standoff with President Luis Arce. Bolivian television captured that scene with 2 tanks and several men in military uniforms outside the building. The soldiers were led by General Juan Jose Zuniga, known for his anti-government views. Well, in response, President Arce called on his supporters to stand against the perpetrators, sparking a series of clashes. Take a look at some of the footage we collected. Dramatic images there, but what's really going on? Because after only about an hour, the armed troops eventually stood down. Here's where it gets interesting. Juan Jose Zuniga, who is now under arrest, claims that President Arce instructed him to prepare that show of force to boost his popularity. So now let's go to international correspondent Manila Chan. So Manila, what's your take on this? The defense claims coming in from Zuniga that this was not actually a coup, this was a false flag.
Well, Ben, there were memes circulating on Twitter yesterday about this very short-lived coup. I mean, some calling it the pizza coup online because, you know, the coup began and ended faster than some people could order a pizza and have it delivered. But it is an interesting allegation by General Zuniga. Right now, there is no evidence to support such a claim, you know, that he was ordered to do this fake coup in order to help bolster Luis Arce's sagging support. But behind Zuniga's defense claim upon his arrest, that is, that there is a growing rift among the MAS party and its direction and its leadership, by whom, with the return from exile of Evo Morales in late 2020, and now he's announcing that he wants to run for yet another term in 2025. This adds another layer to the political mess that is Bolivia. Now, if you recall, back in 2019, when Morales first fled after that military coup at that time, opposition Senator Janine Áñez declared herself interim president, much in the way that Juan Guaido did in Venezuela, with foreign support from the American government and groups like OAS. Now, she gave the green light to the military at that time to quash dissent by pro-Morales protesters, allowing the military to shoot and kill 33 demonstrators. So it was a very tumultuous time, coupled with the COVID pandemic that hit during the political strife. The elections got rescheduled, and ultimately, the MAS party still prevailed, which put Luis Arce in office in 2020. So Zuniga's claims against Arce really don't make any sense in the broader picture. If recent history tells us anything, it would say that there's outside influence at play here once again, Ben.
Well, if there is outside play, I'm not saying there isn't, but it's so pathetic. The whole thing was so, as you said, it was short-lived. It was so weak. What a weak attempt at a coup. It's hard to believe that anyone could have organized this, but maybe more on that in a bit. Let's move to this other story. So Brussels is set to sign a defense pact with Ukraine on Thursday. The agreement, it aims to bolster Ukraine's security and defense in 9 key areas, including weapons deliveries, of course, military training, of course, building up the defense industry cooperation. It's not a mutual defense treaty, though. I'm sure you can imagine why. The pact promises swift EU consultation and action in case of future aggression. Manila, this is a pretty significant move by the EU, but it's yet another example of their commitment to defending Ukraine, keeping the U.S. satisfied, it seems like. But at the same time, again, this is not a mutual defense agreement. What does that mean? It means so if the EU is attacked, we're not going to call on Ukraine, maybe because they have no military left and they're drafting 15 to 60-year-olds into the army.
Yeah, I mean, so Ben, we can characterize it that way, you know, but we can also view it through the lens of, say, celebrity marriage. And here's what I mean by that. First, who is this guy that signed the pact for the Ukraine side? I mean, Zelensky's term as president ended in May. Based on Ukrainian law, in lieu of inaugurating a new president, the interim role should be passed to their version of Speaker of the House. So Zelensky's signature on this whole thing is dubious. Now, the pact itself is only 12 pages long, and it only outlines funding through the end of 2024, which is coincidentally when the world will learn who becomes the new American president. But it does talk about wider security measures, as you mentioned, which includes cooperation in the way of military training and aid to Ukraine, specifically only to Ukraine. But what I found most interesting was that it specifically talks about countering cyber threats, as well as, and this is a quote, foreign information manipulation and interference. Translation, the continued censorship of any Russian-related media, content, or even dissent against the EU or U.S. role in making this a protracted war.
Yeah, well, and that's absolutely true. Look, the persecution of journalists, of online media in Ukraine is pretty astounding. But when you look at like American companies like YouTube and Facebook and the work that they have done to squash any kind of dissent, not only at the behest of the FBI, but at the behest of Ukraine's SBU, it is remarkable to think the kind of influence that it's having worldwide. But let's move on to this other story, too. We've talked about this earlier this week. Julian Assange, finally back home in Australia, the WikiLeaks founder, reunited with his family after finalizing a deal, pleading guilty to a single charge of conspiracy. In return, he'll receive credit for time served, avoiding any further jail time. Take a look at the moments that he returned home here.
he's hugging Stella.
Oh, Stella there?
Yeah, he's hugging her now.
Oh.
He picked her up in the air. Dad, he's hugging his dad.
Kisses.
Yeah, hugs his dad.
It was us meeting on the tarmac, but it was the entire world who was celebrating. Julian plans to swim in the ocean every day. He plans to sleep in a real bed. He plans to taste real food. And he plans to enjoy his freedom.
Wow, pretty incredible stuff. Now, while the celebration is taking place in Australia, the mood in Washington, as you might imagine, is more subdued. Despite Assange pleading guilty to that single charge of conspiracy to commit crime, espionage, a court ruled that his actions did not endanger anyone. Here's the thing, though. The State Department spokesperson, Matthew Miller, seemed to have missed that memo, insisting to reporters that Assange, yes, he did do wrong, without really explaining what that was. Listen to this.
But are you satisfied that the case is over?
So look, the Justice Department has spoken to that, and I don't have anything to add. Obviously, the ambassador put out a statement that said we were happy to work with our Australian colleagues on it, and that remains the case. I do think it is important when we talk about Julian Assange to remind the world that the actions for which he was indicted and for which he has now pled guilty are actions that put the lives of our partners, our allies, and our diplomats at risk, especially those who work in dangerous places like Afghanistan and Iraq.
Sorry, so I actually did cover the State Department back then, and I don't remember there being any public, there was a public concern that was raised about the potential security risk posed to sources who might have been quoted. Was there actually any, did you ever discover anyone who was injured, killed, had to go into hiding because of them?
So a few things about that. One, I can't give you a definitive answer, only because I wasn't here at the time. You know, if you drive drunk down the street and get pulled over for drunk driving, the fact that you didn't crash into another car and kill someone doesn't get you out of the reckless actions and the endangerment that you put your fellow citizens in. And it's the same thing, the same principle applies here.
Right. Well, I don't think that it does. But the fact of the matter is that the State Department has been, at least as far as I know, and maybe I'm wrong, but has never been able to point to anyone who was compromised or killed or.
All right. Manila, this is an insane press conference. So Matthew Miller is standing there saying, Julian Assange put our partners at risk. He endangered the lives of Americans and our diplomats and spies. He endangered so many people. And the reporter says, who? And he says, I don't know, I wasn't here. I mean, what kind of a response is this?
Ben, I mean, I have no words to describe Matt Miller. Actually, I do have some words, but the FCC won't allow me to say them. That was such a laughable answer that he gave. You know, that was before my time here. What a lame response. I mean, I wasn't alive during the JFK era, but I know what happened during his administration because guess what, Ben? I can read and seek answers to the questions that I might have. What kind of weak answer was this from a guy who's supposed to be, you know, a government official? He's actually hired to speak for a living. It was a weaselly way out of having to be further pressed on a topic that, you know, nobody being harmed by WikiLeaks or the Assange releases.
No, but Manila, it's not just that nobody was harmed. You can argue that people's lives were saved because of Julian Assange. The fact that you had people, large numbers of civilians in Iraq and Afghanistan dying as a result of what was taking place there, and then you have Julian Assange and WikiLeaks revealing it, and I would say turning the course of the Iraq war, turning the course of the Afghanistan war, and bringing an end to the massacre of civilians. It wasn't that he was endangering people, he's saving people, and this clown is standing there saying, no, I think it's really bad. It's bad. It's so bad. Tell me what's bad about it. I don't know. Not really sure. Somebody told me.
I wasn't here.
Terrible.
I wasn't here.
Awful.
But Ben.
Yeah, real quick, we're on time.
We use the term harm very loosely these days. I mean, I can't speak to anyone's feelings or reputations of being hurt or harmed, but to date, there is no evidence that any person whose name was even mentioned in those docs had a hair on their heads harmed. So, all of this is just a weak response because they have no answer.
We got to go. But look, Julian Assange, the thing he harmed was the reputation of the U.S. military and organizations like the CIA that were committing crimes against people. And he embarrassed permanent Washington. He embarrassed the Bush administration, the Obama administration.
Absolutely.
And that's why he was in prison. Manila, we get fired up on this, but thanks for doing that. All right, still ahead. We circle back to our top story of the day, that dramatic failed coup attempt, if it really was one, in Bolivia. Find out why some are pointing fingers at the U.S. for allegedly being involved. We'll break it all down right after the break. Stay tuned.
I can hear you. Sure. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Great.
How about now, Camilla? Can you hear me?
I can hear you now.
Okay, fantastic. Great. We're going to start up here in about 30 seconds. Thanks for doing this.
Thanks for having me.
And welcome back to our show and the top story of the day, the failed coup attempt in Bolivia. Theories are swirling on X, formerly Twitter, speculating that the coup attempt was covertly backed by the CIA, which they do all the time in Latin America, so why not this one, right? Some are pointing to Bolivia's extensive lithium reserves. So let's break it down. Despite holding the world's largest lithium reserves, Bolivia has struggled to industrialize the resource. However, recent agreements with the Chinese and Russian companies in 2023, it could transform Bolivia's economy. And this development is not sitting well with officials in Washington. Big surprise there. So joining us now to discuss, we have Camila Escalante. She is a journalist based in Latin America. Camila, thanks for being here. First of all, kind of take us through this recent coup attempt. Videos burst onto social media, but an interesting meme on X pointed out that the time from the beginning of this so-called coup attempt to its end took less time than ordering and having a pizza delivered. Was this a serious threat, do you think, to the establishment? Was this a real coup? I know that there is a claim by Zuniga, General Zuniga, that he was put up to this. Do you believe that, or do you believe this was a failed coup attempt by an outside power?
These are the same questions that everyone inside of Bolivia is asking right now. Everyone from the left, represented by the movement towards socialism, the party led by Evo Morales, and the right wing, the far right, who led the coup in 2019. They're asking the same questions. And I think just normal, everyday supporters of the government want to know as well. What exactly transpired? What were the conversations that were had during what looked like a confrontation or a discussion between Zuniga and President Luis Arce and his ministers there in the government palace for a number of minutes? They stood face to face. You saw people pointing, putting their hands up. And what we do know is that reportedly the Minister of Government, or Interior Minister, perhaps in English, would told this commander that he needed to stand down and tell his officers to withdraw from Plaza Murillo. The government also said that they would not be adhering to the demands to resign and move over so that the military or this faction of the military could install their own leadership in the country. And just like that, it seemed that they withdrew. And of course, in a matter of minutes, Luis Arce and his vice president headed inside, and they named a whole new high command of the military, which is really interesting. It means that Luis Arce survived what took place, although he is probably in a very weak position because since 2019, we've seen a number of changes to the high command of both the military and the police. So now there are also questions about whether something like this could happen again, whatever it is that is investigated or what they decide that this actually was. Could it happen again? They have elections in Bolivia in 2025. And right now, there is a concerted effort by the right wing and by those who carried out the coup in 2019, as well as their allies in the exterior, that would be the US and its allies, to try to sow division in the country and destabilize the country and split up the left so that the right has some fighting chance at actually winning an election.
Yeah, it's interesting to see how much attention is on Bolivia right now. And I guess the elephant in the room when it comes to Bolivia, certainly those lithium reserves we mentioned. Bolivia has more than enough lithium to make the country awfully prosperous and wealthy. And it looks like the country's leadership wants to head in that direction with investment, again, as we mentioned, from China. Bolivia's president meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin at the St. Petersburg Economic Forum earlier this month. None of that is a good sign. We would take it for Washington. Take us through just how much lithium Bolivia has and where the country's current kind of lithium extraction and production industry stands right now. There's been talk over recent years about nationalizing lithium reserves in order for the whole country to prosper. But as you mentioned, the right wing isn't a fan of that, and certainly outside powers like the U.S., they hate that idea.
Yeah, Bolivia has nationalized its lithium reserves, and as Southcom in the United States always speaks about, this area of Argentina, Chile, and Bolivia has the most lithium in all of the world. And it's been a process, a very interesting process over the last few years since Luis Arce came to power in Bolivia following the triumph of the Bolivian people over the coup, that they have been needing to look for these partners to try to develop that lithium. And of course, this has been a little bit of a political thing as well, because there are bidders, potential partners from the United States, from China, Russia, and many other countries of the world who want to develop with Bolivia. So this is something that's always a factor. And this is directly linked to what, any destabilization or anything that we see in the country. We can't say right now, we can only speculate what sort of outside powers, to return to your first question, might have been involved in what took place in the planning. We know that something was planned. The commander himself said that he met with the different commanders of the armed forces. He was the head of the military. He said that he had the support of certain actors of the Air Force and the Navy as well. He actually said that the reason he was unsuccessful in reaching his aims of overthrowing the government, or according to him, restoring democracy yesterday, was because the armed forces, the Navy and the Air Force didn't actually show up at Plaza Murillo as they were supposed to. But if it is the case that a lot of planning and plotting went into what transpired yesterday over the course of the past weeks, we do have to ask what sort of discussions were held between the armed forces and members of the right-wing opposition and any sort of allies they have in the exterior, whether it be the U.S. Embassy in La Paz or any other countries that participated in organizing or supporting and legitimizing the coup in 2019. Was it that sort of a thing? These are the questions that are being asked.
Yeah, and they're big questions. Look, you go to Latin America and South America, and you see Chinese influence everywhere right now. Obviously, the Belt and Road Initiative has been pretty powerful in terms of the changes that are being made in Latin and South America. You also see that the model of coup that the United States has run now for many decades, where they go into a country and they decide, well, we want to control this either economically, we want to bring multinational corporations in here and give them control, and so they engineer these coups. And it's become such a playbook. We watch it play out over and over and over. We saw it playing out in Venezuela with Juan Guaido and the attempt that the U.S. had there to install him as the leader of the country. And so we see this taking place all the time. I'm just curious as to what is happening in Latin America and South America in terms of the shift by people in those countries who say, look, the Chinese and the Russians treat us differently. I feel like the U.S. uses this hammer-first approach where they want to go in, smash everything, and then say, don't worry, we'll put it back together the right way using your own people, which it never is, really. And the Chinese have a very different model. In the long run, how do you see this playing out, especially when you have a country that is so rich in lithium? It seems like the Chinese-Russian model of saying, let's work with you, rather than trying to overthrow and basically take it all from you, seems to work better.
It does work better. You asked a number of questions there. I think it's going to be very tricky for Luis Arce, who is vying for re-election in 2025, to get reelected without the support of the broader left and the movement towards socialism led by Evo Morales. That is what the United States and its allies is focusing on. They're focusing on sowing division within the country, within the revolutionary sectors, within that is the people who supported the radical change under Evo Morales, and the campesinos, the rural people, and the unions, of course, and the indigenous sectors. Those people are going to need to support Luis Arce or Evo Morales or whoever it is for this project to remain in power. And these are people who largely support the project of developing jointly with countries like China and Russia. Luis Arce has been very savvy on the foreign policy front, just like Evo Morales. Even though there has been a crisis internally and there has been some economic problems, particularly in the last couple of years, he has had very solid foreign policy when it comes to Palestine, when it comes to Iran, and obviously Russia. So that's very key. That means that he has a lot of support and legitimacy internationally. And he's seen as having some sort of a strong voice on particular issues. I think that it's going to be more of an internal struggle within the country to see if he can garner that support and remain in power. This, of course, was the fifth consecutive government elected by the Bolivian people. Only 4 of them have been carried out. The fourth of the 5 was when Evo Morales was reelected in 2019, but of course he was not able to serve his 4th term because of the coup. So this is what they're trying to avoid right now: another destabilization attempt, another entry of these NGOs and so-called human rights organizations, funded, of course, by the NED, by USAID, etc., that will disrupt the process.
Yeah, and whenever the NGOs come in, you know you're going in the wrong direction. Last question for you. We have about a minute left. If this coup was in fact engineered by Western partners, by the United States and others, how embarrassing is it? We talk about the model of the coup has been run for a long time. It seems to get progressively worse. It seems to become progressively incompetent. If this one does turn out to be U.S.-led, is it just an embarrassment at this point to have put together something so shoddy, so inept, and to now have Washington's stamp on this? Does it just further destroy credibility there?
Well, it shows that the, Washington allied sectors are completely inept in the country. It's not the only coup attempt we've seen. We saw so many coup attempts and actually assassination attempts against Evo Morales during his 14 years of presidency. We saw one coup, but we've seen many attempts against Luis Arce's presidency. We've seen destabilization. We've seen violent groups take to the streets and hold roadblocks and all sorts of other things in the Department of Santa Cruz and otherwise. This is the one that took the headlines internationally because we saw so many armored vehicles and hundreds of military literally ram down the front doors of the government palace. But it's not the first time, and it won't be the last time. They have all been failed attempts, and it just means that the right wing in the country, the opposition, has no strength, it has no people, it has no project, and no one is supporting it except these exterior powers and their vast amount of money and influence.
Camila Escalante, thank you so much for your time, your insight. We've learned a lot today. Thank you.
Thanks.
And that is our show for you today. I'm Ben Swan. We'll see you next time covering stories that have a direct impact.